He's either reborn once more in this world and reaches the end, or he's reborn in the heavenly realm and reaches the end there, or he's reborn in the heavenly realm, then comes down one more time to the human world, it's twice returning, and then makes an end. But probably because the usual way is one more rebirth, or at least that's the way for one with sharper faculties. So this disciple is called the once returner. Okay, then the third stage is one who destroys the 5 lower fetters. The 5 fetters that bind one to the sensuous realm of existence, even to the human realm, even to the heavenly realms in which there is still sensual enjoyment. And so this disciple eliminates, of course, the first 3 fetters, and on top of that, he eradicates sensual craving and ill will, anger, irritation. Those are the other 2 fetters that bind one to the sensual realm. And so one who eradicates the 5 lower fetters as becomes a non-returner. In Pali, it's anagami. And this kind of disciple, will still take rebirth, but not in the sensual realm. This kind of disciple will take rebirth in one of the higher realms of existence, in the form realm. They are reborn spontaneously, not with parents, and in the form realm, they attain final nibbana, full enlightenment, and they reach nirvana in that realm without ever taking rebirth again in the sense realm, sense sphere of existence. Now, normally, in the progression of stages of awakening, the stage of non-returner would be followed by the attainment of arhatship. But here, the text wants to put in all the benefits. And so, you see, the attainment of straight mentara, once returning, non-returning, let me put it this way. Sometimes the attainment of arhatship comes as the 4th of the 4 stages of awakening. But other times, the attainment of arhatship comes as the 6th of what are called the 6 abhinya. These are the 6 higher knowledges, the 6 superior types of knowledge. Being a good doggy, don't pull away from your pose. It's okay. Okay, so other times the text will present arhatship as the 6th of the 6 abhinya, the higher knowledges. So what this sutta has done is to splice the scheme of the 6th. It had to find a place to put in the 5 mundane abhinyas, culminating in arhatship as the 6th. And so what it did is to splice them in between the 3rd stage of enlightenment and the 4th stage of enlightenment. And so we have 6 abhinyas. 5 of these are worldly. That is, they don't require any kind of higher wisdom. But in the Buddha's day, even the yogis who are practicing meditation deep in the forest, without any kind of superior wisdom or enlightenment, just through the power of their samadhi, would be able to gain these supernormal powers. And even today, we sometimes hear about them, yogis in India who possess them, and meditators in some of the Buddhist countries. Maybe they will strike us as incredible, but it's said that these are powers that come through the strong development of meditation. And we meet them again and again in the Buddhist texts, and so for myself I have little doubt that they're attainable. Okay, so we have what are called the iddhis. These are the psychic powers, or sometimes called the magical powers, or mystical powers. So if the monk should wish, may I wield the various kinds of iddhis, supernormal powers. Having been one, that's with one body, may I become many. So I'm able to emanate many bodies out from my original body, so that they all look alike. So maybe if you meet Bhikkhu Bodhi down in Taishu Hall, then you come up to Kuan Yin Hall in order to see the Buddha image here, then you see maybe he's sitting in meditation there. So I left him just down below 5 minutes ago in Taishu Hall. How is he here? That's through power of abhinya. But in my case, more likely, somebody gave me a ride. Okay, then with the many bodies, one brings them all back into one's original body. Then one can appear, may I appear and vanish, that is, one can make oneself invisible, and then one could reappear wherever one wants. May I go unhindered through a wall, through an enclosure, through a mountain, as though through space, without being obstructed. May I dive in and out of the earth as though it were water. So with the power of samadhi, one makes the determination, let the earth be like water for me. And then the earth, in one's own perception, becomes like water, and one can dive down into it. In other people might be watching you, and they see you go into the earth and come out, and they're amazed. But they don't know that this is through the power of samadhi that you've transformed that area of earth where you're standing, effectively transformed it into water. May I walk on water without sinking as though it were earth. Through the power of the samadhi, one makes the determination, let this water be solid like earth, then one could walk across the water. Seated cross-legged, may I travel in space like a bird. This is something of which I can speak from direct personal experience. Sometimes when I'm flying in a plane, if there's nobody sitting next to me, then I might lift my legs up and cross them. But it's said that those who are really accomplished in meditation, they don't have to go to the airport to get on a plane, but they just can be sitting maybe in their cave, cross the legs, that make the determination, may I travel from this place to another place 100 miles away, and then the body will levitate even up hundreds of meters into space, and then they'll go traveling 100 miles away, and then come descend. And then with my hand, may I touch and stroke the moon and sun, so powerful and mighty. And may I wield bodily mastery even as far as the Brahma world. The Brahma world is the beginning of the form realm. And so it said that the Buddha and some of the great disciples were able to go with their whole bodies intact to travel to other realms of existence, even up to the Brahma world, and to meet with the Brahma deities and to talk with them. You know, some people are skeptical of these things, but I always tell them that if we were living back, say, in the 15th century, 14th century, well, let me give you an example from my own experience. This doesn't go back to the 14th century, it goes back to 1984, 1985. When I was living in Sri Lanka, then a friend of mine, a fellow American monk, told me that now in America there's this invention that you can be, you know, hundreds of miles, in fact, you could be hundreds of miles away from another person, and you've written a letter, and you take this letter and you put it over this machine, you press a button, and another person hundreds of miles away will get that letter, a copy of that letter. If it's handwritten, it will be exactly in your handwriting. Everything just the way you've written it. And I said to him, "Come on, stop pulling my leg, you're just kidding me." And he said, "No, they call this a fax machine." And like now the fax machine, we all take it for granted. And I remember the first time in Sri Lanka, 1987, I had to make a trip to India, and I went to the travel agent in the town of Kandy, and as often happens in Kandy, the telephones go out of service. So they tried to call maybe their headquarters in Colombo, call wouldn't go through. Then the guy, the travel agent, took this telephone, and there was no wire to it. And I couldn't believe it. Pressed some buttons, and then he was talking on the telephone. And I was incredulous. How was he doing this? You know, this was the first time I ever saw a cell phone, 1987. Probably already in the US they were just fairly commonplace. But I don't think people in Sri Lanka yet, for the most part, had cell phones. They were just very rare. Only a few more highly developed business offices would have them. Okay, now, like, every kid who gets to be 14 years old is asking, is it 14 or 13? Asking his parents, when am I going to get my handphone? When am I going to get my handphone? And then if they don't get the handphone, they're crying, oh, you have to give me the handphone. Okay, so this even, for me, 1985, 1987, I couldn't believe these things, but they turned out to be real. And then if you go back to the 14th century and you were to tell people then, oh, 5 centuries from now, people will be flying in these metal devices from Europe to India. Of course, they didn't know India at that time, perhaps, but they'll be able to fly from England to France. Say, how is that possible? It seems unbelievable. So things that seem unbelievable to us, but well, let's say, we shouldn't doubt things that seem unbelievable to us just because they lie beyond our capability of comprehension. Of course, they could be real to those who have those powers. Okay, so these are the supernormal powers. Then we come the divine ear element. This is the capacity of hearing sounds in distant realms of existence or in distant places in other realms of existence. The third is the ability to know the minds of others, to be able to read the thoughts of others, to know their mental states, to know the quality or level of their mind. You can read that in detail for yourself. The fourth is the ability to recollect one's previous lives, even going back hundreds and thousands of lives. The sixth is the divine eye, with which one could see other beings passing away and taking rebirth in accordance with their karma. Okay, so these five are the mundane, called the mundane super knowledges, because they don't require any kind of superior wisdom, any kind of deep insight into the nature of things, but just the ability to use the power of samadhi to develop certain faculties normally lying latent in the mind, which can now awaken through the mastery of the mind achieved by samadhi. But the sixth abhinya is the fourth stage of enlightenment, and this is the destruction of the asavas, the outflows, the influxes, the leakages or taints. And so here the monk might wish, may I, by realizing for myself with direct knowledge, here and now enter upon and abide in the deliverance of mind, the liberation of mind, and liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints, the destruction of the asavas. So in other words, this is the wish to achieve the complete destruction of all of the mind's defilements. And thereby one gains what is called the liberation of mind, which is at the same time a liberation by wisdom. Wisdom cuts off all the defilements, and then one can enter into this liberation of mind, which is completely free from any kind of contaminating influence of the defilements. So if one has such a wish, again, the requisites are the same. Let him fulfill the precepts, be devoted to inner serenity internal serenity of mind, not neglecting meditation. Let one be possessed of insight, and let one frequently dwell in empty huts. And then the sutta closes by repeating the opening paragraph, again underscoring the importance for the monastics of possessing this virtue or restraint of the patimokkha. Okay, so this will be our presentation of the sutta. If there's any questions on any of this, then please feel welcome to. We could take some questions now. Okay, Richard? Yeah, okay. Is it on? Yeah, it's on.
This last section 19, is there anything to be made of or anything to understand about this? Is when they refer to the destruction of the taints as the final liberation, rather than the uprooting of the other five fetters. Then there's this progression, and suddenly switches gears.
Yeah, this is an interesting point. I found that the other five, what's called the higher fetters, are not mentioned very often. Some have introduced the idea that the five higher fetters were not an original part of the Buddha's teaching. This I don't know. One does find them in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the fifth book of the Samyutta Nikaya, in a repetitive passage, where it's like part of a standard formula applied to all of the different factors of the path, the Noble Eightfold Path, the 7 enlightenment factors, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and so on. All of those are said to be the way to eliminate the 5 higher fetters. But usually one doesn't get this. In the Majjhima Nikaya, I'm not sure that the 5 higher fetters are mentioned at all. So instead of bringing in the 5 higher fetters, these texts usually bring in the destruction of the asavas. So I don't know the explanation for that, but of the 5 fetters, 3 of them are comprised within the destruction of the asavas. Did everybody get the sheet which correlates asavas with fetters and latent tendencies? No. Anyway, I will bring it next time. I have to make some more copies, I think. If you didn't get a copy, then raise the hands and we'll get some idea how many. Oh, you were absent last time. Yeah, so about 10. And I can make about 12 more copies.
So even though there's it's an implicit reference to there being other fetters, it says here we say the 5 lower fetters,
Yeah.
but it's not explicitly discussed in the...
Yeah, what doesn't meet the 5 higher fetters often contrasted with the 5 lower fetters. Just the 5 lower fetters are mentioned, and then what lies beyond the elimination of the 5 lower fetters is the destruction of the asavas. Oh, these are copies of that. Oh, these are copies that were left from last week. Oh, okay. Let's see how many we have here. Maybe I'll just put it here, and then I think there's about 6 to 8 copies. But then I'll bring more copies next time. Did everybody get a copy now? Anybody who didn't get a copy? Okay, I'll bring some copies next time. Don't worry, you'll get it. Any further questions?
Bodhi, do you have suggestions on practical steps to overcome the identity view?
Well, to overcome the identity view, one has to develop the insight into non-self, and then one has to do that by going through the stages of, one has to develop some degree of samadhi. In my view, it doesn't have to be developed to the level of jhana in order to practice insight. And then normally one would have to go through the procedure for practicing insight meditation, which is basically practicing the 4 satipatthānas. And normally, the insight into impermanence emerges first. Then one could use that either directly to see into non-self, or one could go from impermanence to dukkha, and then use both of them to see into non-self.
Bhante, you talked about you said that in the text the jhana is used sometimes in a more general sense to indicate activity of meditation rather than the absorption type of meditation. Is that, I don't want to take your words too far, so I'm wondering if that also means that when we simply meditate, and by that I mean shamatha and vipassana meditation, is that also understood to mean that the shamatha and vipassana meditation lead to those absorptions, lead to the to jhana, without a specific activity of jhana meditation?
Okay, this is an interesting question. First, it would be the practices of samatha that are designed to lead to the jhanas, rather than the practice of vipassana. Though it needs a certain amount of, I would say, wisdom or insight into the workings of the mind in order to know what kind of mental factors have arisen, which are wholesome, which are unwholesome, how one has to apply, say, balance one's energy and calmness in order to achieve the jhanas. Now there are certain meditation subjects which are said to be more conducive to the jhanas than others. And so, for example, it's the mindfulness of breathing, which is recommended as a meditation that leads to the jhanas. And this is said to be the meditation subject the Buddha himself used on the night of his enlightenment. And then, particularly within the tradition stemming from the Visuddhimagga, there's a kind of device mentioned in the suttas called kasina, which you must have heard of. They're like circular discs, sometimes representing one of the four elements, or sometimes covered with a particular color, like all blue, all white, all red, all yellow. And so that kind of meditation is especially conducive to jhana. A meditation subject like analysis of the body into the four elements, or say the mindful observance of the arising and passing of phenomena, does not lead to the four jhanas themselves. But the commentaries sometimes try to give a broader meaning to the word jhana than one finds in the suttas. So they speak about that jhana means the focusing of the mind, the intense focusing of the mind on an object. And so the suttas say that, or the commentaries say that there is I forgot the exact terms of distinction. But the distinction is between the jhanas which are achieved through samatha meditation, and those are actually the four jhanas of the suttas. And then there is the intense contemplation of an object which brings insight knowledge, and that is the intense focusing of the mind on the three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Okay, I'm going to look at the questions that come from the internet. Then we'll have to stop for the morning and then come back after lunch for about a half an hour discussion period. Okay, question 1 is the phrase dwelling in empty huts, very similar to the phrase for the days abiding that we find in many suttas. Yeah, it's similar. For the days abiding just means that one finds a suitable place to dwell for the day. It might not be in a hut, it could be at the foot of a tree or in the forest, but the empty hut is a better sheltered place. Question 2. For the accomplished yogi, does the expression the days abiding mean that they enter the jhana states and become detached from the 6 senses of worldly experience? Probably for accomplished yogis, that's what it means. But it doesn't necessarily have that meaning. Somebody who's not an accomplished yogi can still go into a quiet, secluded place for the day's dwelling without being able to enter the jhana. But they'll practice for the achievement either of jhana or for insight. Okay, meditation teachers stress that for successful meditation, the mind should not have any expectations or desires such as the desire for jhana. Isn't it a paradox that the Buddhist aspirants must have wishes? It's actually not as much of a paradox as it might sound, since if one wishes to achieve the jhana, what one does is form the aspiration or wish, then one undertakes the practice. But when one is engaged in the practice, in order to gain that kind of stillness or balance of mind needed to enter the jhana, one shouldn't be constantly hankering after the jhana, as though it's a kind of state that one wants to enter through one's craving for this superior experience, but with the idea, I want to gain the jhana so I can come out and then tell all my friends who are still struggling with wandering thoughts, sensual desire, or angry thoughts, then they'll say, how was your meditation today? Oh, I just got to the second jhana, I wasn't able to get into the third. Then they'll say, wow, he's really beyond us. Yeah, so one can form that aspiration, then one practices, but one doesn't let the mind get carried away by this, I gotta get the jhana, I gotta get it. Because that will be a disturbance. If a person has jhana experience beforehand, if they switch to vipassana meditation, is it possible for him to reach vipassana jhana status? Normally, using the sutta terminology, we don't speak about vipassana jhana, though I think U Pandita uses that expression, vipassana jhana. But what he actually means are the stages of vipassana knowledge which are held to be counterparts in some way of the jhanas. Okay, so if one has strong jhana experience, and that will provide a firm foundation for developing the vipassana meditation. Though some people who are very skilled in jhana have a difficult time with vipassana, where others who are not so skilled in jhana will move more easily into vipassana. So normally, jhana will provide a solid foundation for vipassana, but a lot depends upon the individual faculties and dispositions of the individual meditator. Okay, with this we'll have to close the discussion for the morning, but those of you who want to participate in the discussion period can come back about 12 o'clock, and then we can take some more questions. Okay, so we end with the sharing of the merits. Again, this is, as I explained earlier, to share the merits that we've acquired through practicing meditation earlier, explaining the Dhamma, discussing the Dhamma. We share it with the other beings in the other realms, inviting them to rejoice, to gain the merits for themselves thereby, and then to protect ourselves, others, and the world. Okay, so I recite in Pali. If you wish to join, you can join me. Akasata chabumanta devanagam hindika punyanta anumodibha chiram rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata devanagam hindika punyanta anumodibha chiram rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata devanagam hindika punyanta anumodibha chiram rakantu param. Eta tacha mehi sambadam punya sambadam. I'll do it the short way. Sabbe devanumodantu, sabbe bhutanumodantu, sabbe satanumodantu, sabba sampati siddhya, bhavagupadhaya avicetato, etantare satakaya upapana, rupi arupicha asanya sanino, dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibhuktim. Okay, so next week we'll have a class, and the next class will be on Sutta number 7 from the Majjhima Nikaya. This is the simile of the cloth. I think it's already on the Bao's website, and I'll also give Kaiti the next suttas that we'll take so she can put them up on the website. After that we do 21st next week. 28th there's no class. December 5th I think it is.
Yes.
We'll have the class. I'll try to do the whole of Majjhima 7 next week, and then December 5th, Majjhima number 8. And both of them are very useful suttas for personal mind training. Okay, we end with the three brothers.